Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation on understanding demographic aging in Puerto Rico. This is a presentation done jointly by Dr. Amilcar Matos-Moreno and Dr. Alexis Santos to the Financial Oversight and Management Board for Puerto Rico. This is a webinar for December 2024. Before we go into the analysis of demographic aging, we want to provide a brief overview of the population of Puerto Rico between 2000 and 2020. The population of Puerto Rico reduced from 3.8 million to 3.2 million, which is equivalent to a 13.73%. And during the period, we observed fertility decline, relatively stable mortality rates, and a significant increases in outmigration. And we will go into details about this during our presentation. Based on our analysis, migration was responsible for the totality of population decline observed in 2010. And in our past analysis, we have also found that outmigration is highly concentrated among working age adults. This led to the question about population composition. This presentation summarizes more than 7 years of continuous and ongoing work conducted by a research team at the Pennsylvania State University. We will focus on findings related to demographic aging in Puerto Rico, included in our published work. Given time constraints, we will focus on 4 studies and we will highlight key findings. For each of these studies, we will provide a reference and we will be happy to provide you a copy of the article if you want it. During the presentation, we will provide necessary context for these findings and we will be happy to answer questions and clarify any concerns. The first study is Migration is the Driving Force of Rapid Aging in Puerto Rico. A research brief is led by Dr. Matos-Moreno, and it was published in Population Research and Policy Review. A Spanish version of this article is available free of cost, and we will be happy to share this article in English form with anyone who thinks they would like to read it. As you can see in this graph, this is the percent of the population over 65 years and older. And what you can see here is, with the dashed lines, are selected case studies of countries that are known to be aging around the world. For example, we present the case of Italy and Japan, well known within the demographic literature as aging countries. We also present the case of Spain. We also provide case samples for Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Cuba, which are comparative countries within the Caribbean. And in this vertical dashed line shows you like the changing trends concerning the pace of change in the percent of over 65 years and older in Puerto Rico. As you can see, Puerto Rico has taken less time to reach 20% of their population age 65 plus than other countries, which shows in this comparison study. Note the case of Japan, which took 20 years to go from a similar rate and into the 20 years. So Puerto Rico did it in 10 years. So in 10 years, Puerto Rico went from being considered an age country to a super age one. And based on data published by the United Nations, this pattern is expected to continue. But what was driving this difference? When we examined the patterns underlying this, we found that the main deviation from the patterns in terms of demographic processes when compared to other countries was migration. Note in panel C how the net migration rate deviates from patterns observed in other countries. This deviation is not observed for the crude birth rate. It is not observed for the crude death rate. And how did this impact population composition? We turn to the data on age and sex composition and show them as these two population pyramids, one presenting number of persons and the other one the percent of the population. As you can see, there's a high deficit of Puerto Ricans when we compare the gray bars representing the 2010 population to the red segments representing the 2020 population. We also notice expansions in the percent of the population represented by groups 50 years and older, and altogether these patterns provide a glimpse on how migration has accelerated demographic aging in Puerto Rico. Given that there were no significant changes in fertility or mortality, these deficits can largely be attributed to outmigration. When we examine the patterns in the comparison countries, we find that these deficits were not as noticeable for them. with probably one exception being Spain during the economic crisis of the late 2000s. How did we get here? And we have coined the term economic headwinds, stronger than Hurricane Maria. Historical patterns of population growth and economic shocks were studied. Work conducted within our research team has examined the complex relationship between environmental and economic shocks and population size and migration in Puerto Rico between 1990 and 2020. The following figures provide a brief overview of these relationships. We are presenting work published in Population and Environment, and this was published after Hurricane Maria and provides kind of an historical overview of what has been these patterns. This graph represents the population side in the solid blue line corresponding to the left axis and the employed population as the red line corresponding to the right axis. As you can appreciate, the population of Puerto Rico increased during the 1990s even when numerous environmental events impacted the island. See the vertical lines denoting Hugo, Hortense, and Georges. This growth only decelerates when we see the first big shock to the number of employed populations in the early years of the 2000s due to the closure of the manufacturing enclaves that had, till then, provided jobs to Puerto Ricans for decades. As you can see, since the onset of the budget crisis and the Great Recession in the late 2000s, the population has reduced considerably, parallel to the decline observed in the employed population. We can see that the impact of Hurricane Maria and Irma simply dropped unemployment and then the population followed. In this graph, we focus on the employed population, shown in red, corresponding to the left axis, and the net passenger flow, shown in blue, corresponding to the right axis. As you can see, the net passenger movement remained relatively stable during the period of analysis. The big exception is the increase observed in the mid-2010s and a significant spike after Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Again, this goes in line with a previous assertion that while there were jobs, migration rates or passenger outflow remained relatively stable. As jobs decreased, there were a lot of push factors exercising their force over the Puerto Rican population. And how did this impact population aging? We turn to the analysis of population structures and demographic aging. We have studied how Puerto Rico compared to other countries and how different shocks have influenced population size. Now we set out to conduct a comprehensive analysis of aging in Puerto Rico, work that was published in 2020. In the following slides, we contextualize what has occurred to the population structure in the era of population decline. Again, this was work published in the Gerontologist, the flagship journal of the Gerontological Society of America, and the article is available free of charge through the Gerontologist, but we will be happy to provide it to anyone who may want to read it. This figure is quite revealing. In the first panel, we can see that while the population reduced in size past 2000, the population 65 plus, represented by the black region, has increased and continued increasing. Consequently, and in line with the population pyramids we presented before, we see an increase in the percent of adults aged 50 plus, 65 plus, and 85 plus since 2000. In the final figure, we show the older adult dependency ratio, which shows how many older adults live in Puerto Rico in relation to the working age adult population. We see that this number has increased from about 17 older adults per 100 workers in 2000 to almost 35 older adults per 100 workers in 2019. This pattern is ongoing and we expect it to keep increasing. This figure is more concerning. As you can see, we had a population pyramid well into the 1990s. However, in the first 20 years of the century, we have lost that pyramid, and we ended up with something that looks like a guitar. This figure is presented for comparison purposes only, but I want to call your attention to the three elements for the 2020 pyramid. Notice that we have labeled areas of the pyramid as top, middle, and the base, because this is important for the discussion we were going to have. The population pyramid for 2020 shows three patterns of aging in Puerto Rico. The first two are the classic drivers of demographic aging. Aging from the base due to the reduction of fertility rates. In the case of Puerto Rico, it has reached the point it is now within the lowest low countries of the world. A forthcoming work delves into this pattern, but we have yet to publish this work. The second case is aging from the top. This is represented by the expansion of the people in age group 65 plus. If you remember the previous pyramids, they were skinny at the top. Let me show them back. That is not the case here. We see an expansion of people over 65 plus and of those age groups in the current population pyramid. Finally, the pattern we have uncovered in our work is the aging in the middle. Note the significant deficits, and we will go into detail later about this, but we've seen it already in a previous population pyramid. We call this aging through compression. Informally, we think of the population being like a bottle, a water bottle, that is being squeezed right in the middle, producing outmigration. One might think that the economic circumstances and other shocks that we have described before, and the instability are the ones squeezing the middle, resulting in outmigration of working age adults. The deficits in the base are probably due to the combination of low fertility and the absence of births for those working age adults that left the island. The patterns we explained in the previous slide are better illustrated by this figure. We forwarded the population from 2000 to 2015 and held migration as zero. This approach has been taken by the Texas state demographer Dr. Lloyd Potter to illustrate the impact of migration in age structures. The result is a population size and structure in absence or in absentia of migration. In this figure, the gray bars are the official estimates for 2015, and the black segments are the population without migration. We call to your attention the big differences observed in the base and in the middle of the pyramid. This reinforces our main takeaway that at least for the first 15 years of the era of population decline, migration was the driving force of accelerated demographic aging in Puerto Rico. Nowadays, and you will see in a couple of slides, fertility decline is playing also a significant role. I want to end up this section with a brief commentary. In our report, we call attention to past attempts to deal and monitor this issue, such as the Demographic Challenge Act or Ley del Reto Demográfico. We also call attention to 5 key pressing issues. First, the expected sources of caregiving and social support are working age adults who are no longer around. We're conducting work to study these dynamics. Second, we call attention to the financial insecurity in late life. Access to healthcare also constitutes a third major area worthy of attention. We speculate that it may be possible that, fourth, we speculate that it may be possible that Puerto Ricans may return to Puerto Rico after living in the United States for the majority of their economically productive years. If this happens, patterns of demographic aging will accelerate slightly. Finally, the impact of austerity measures and government reforms on population well-being are worthy of attention. This includes pension reforms which have direct impact on individuals and the overall economy. We want to conclude on a note about the future of demographic aging in Puerto Rico. And we will provide a series of scenarios based on our understanding of demographic aging in Puerto Rico. This work was presented in the annual meeting of the Southern Demographic Association, and we're very happy to report that it won the E. Walter Terry Award for State and Local Demography. This work is co-authored by Dr. Santos and Amilcar Matos. This final study explored patterns of population change in terms of population size and age composition. We produced a series of counterfactuals or what-if scenarios to try and obtain a glimpse at the population that could have materialized in Puerto Rico if the 2005 economic shock had not occurred, or if its effects were short-lived. This work was presented, as I said, in the annual meeting of the Southern Demographic Association and won the most prestigious award in applied demography. These what-if scenarios, in a more recent work, the one I'm going to present right now, we have approached demographic aging by producing a series of counterfactual scenarios concerning population size and composition. In the next slides, we show the main findings from this work, and we also project demographic aging for 2030. In this figure, we first compared the accuracy of our model for 2000 and find it to predict population relatively well. We see that in 2010, there are noticeable deficits in working age population and in the base of the pyramid. Notice the difference between the red and the blue line. For 2020, we see the emergence of more deficits in the working age population, but now the gap between the projection and the decennial count in pink is more noticeable, and that would be Model 3. We also present A big what if. We ask, how would the 2020 population look if migration wave was short-lived? What if we only had 5 years of out-migration? This is presented in Model 4, the left graph. As you can see, there wouldn't be that big of a deficit in the working age adults or in the base of the pyramid. As we have in the pyramid. In panel V or model 5, we focus on the population if out-migration wave never occurred. Notice how the deficits are now concentrated in the working age populations and the base of the pyramid. Simply said, the onset of the 2005 economic shock, the resulting migration wave that started a little bit earlier than 2005 because there were preludes to this economic shock, have resulted in high deficits in the base of the population and the working age adult population in Puerto Rico. Further, I want to call your attention to the fact that deficits are concentrated in these two populations. Little to no difference are observed in the population 65 years and older. Finally, this figure provides a very conservative projection for the population of 2030 in dark black and compares it to the past population structures in gray. At the top, you have the population counts, and in the bottom, we have the percent of the population. As you can see, both the number and proportion of the population 65 plus represent will increase if patterns remain consistent with those observed for 2020, pushing Puerto Rico into having 30% of the population 65 plus. This would put Puerto Rico on par with countries like Japan and South Korea and surpassing Italy in this indicator, and Spain. We want to point out that this is a very conservative estimate of age composition, and the future may very well exceed it. This assertion is supported by our analysis of the accuracy, or lack of, for the era of population decline. In every decade, it underestimates the percent of the population 65 plus, the percent, due to the overestimation of people in younger age groups. In conclusion, Puerto Rico is aging at an accelerated rate. Initial migration was the main driver of the acceleration from 2005 to 2015. The reduction of fertility rates to below repayment levels are now playing a very prominent role in accelerating aging in Puerto Rico, 2016 onward. And we project that this pattern will continue into 2030 if no major changes are observed in the demographic dynamics for Puerto Rico. We are going to thank you for your attention, and we'll look forward to your comments and in the discussion.